We are people who really value strength in all the different ways that it's manifested in this life. You might even say that we're kind of enamored of it. We all want to be strong in different ways. In fact, it's hard for us to see much downside at all to strength. And that's why what the Apostle Paul says in 2 Corinthians 12:10 may kind of catch us by surprise. He writes this. He says, "That is why, for Christ's sake, I delight in weakness, in insult, in hardship, in persecution, in difficulties, for when I am weak, I am strong." Now, Paul was one of the most spiritual people who ever lived. And here he is saying that he delights in weakness. He delights in the hardships that he faces. And that's just not the way that most of us think about those things. So why is it that Paul would say he delights in his own weakness? And the thing is that Paul's point here is that in those places when we are feeling weak or we're at a point of weakness in who we are, as people of faith, we're much more likely to cling to God and to operate out of his power instead of by our own strength. And it's the same when we face hardships. We're much more likely when life gets hard to rely on God and to operate out of his strength and not on our own. So it's not that weakness or hardship are good necessarily, but Paul's point is that these things can have a good result in us when we face them in the right way, when we trust God and we really rely on him. And the truth is that's what we should be doing all the time, in good times and in the weak and hard times, but it's something that we often seem to lose sight of. Now, Paul also says something else that's very important in this verse. Right at the end, he says, "For when I am weak, I am strong." What encouragement is there for us in that? Well, first of all, I think it means that God will provide for us, that God will supply us even when we're weak, even when we're down. In fact, I think Paul kind of suggests here that we may experience God's working most powerfully in us, in our weakness and in the hard places in life, because they tend to cause us to really rely on him. Another encouragement here is that God can do great things in us, and God can do great things through us even when we're weak, even when we may feel beat down by the hardships of life around us, because the truth is that it's so much more about God's strength at work in us than it is about us and our own strength. I also think that it's really encouraging here that the Apostle Paul is so honest about his life and his faith. He straight out says that he has weak places, that he feels weak sometimes, that his life is just hard at points. He doesn't pretend that being a person of faith means that his life is perfect and that he's somehow a perfectly faithful person. And if a great spiritual man like the Apostle Paul says that he experienced things like weakness and hardship, it means that there's nothing wrong with us, that when we face those things, it's okay that we do. They're a normal part of this life that we live. But what Paul does here that really shows his depth and his wisdom is that he sees the spiritual opportunity, even in our weakness, even in our hardship, and he invites us to take advantage of it. So let's follow Paul's lead. When we're in those places of weakness, when we're in those places where life is really hard, may we seek to cling to God even more and to rely on his strength to carry us through, to grow us and to teach us. May we too delight in such things.